We're very happy to welcome Will Wells with us, the founder and president of Hummingbird Technologies. And I think he's really the right person to start off this day to give us an introduction into artificial intelligence and agriculture and what we are expecting in the future, what this could all mean for agriculture and the industry itself, and what different applications exist out there. And I'm really happy that we could have him to join today.
Great. Hi, Wills.
Morning.
Morning.
Morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here.
Great to have you.
So I'm going to make up the 6 minutes that you've lost. Just to say, firstly, thank you for having me. It's a great pleasure to see so many distinguished guests from Austria and beyond. I'd like to talk to you today in several different capacities. So firstly, as the founder of Hummingbird Technologies, which is an AI and remote sensing company for agriculture. I'm going to share my screen while I go along. Secondly, as a diehard investor in AI and agri-food tech since the beginning, I note that last year we had $30 billion of new investment into the space, much of it that was geared by artificial intelligence. And without giving everyone a history lesson, when I started Hummingbird, when we were writing the first lines of Python code back in 2015-16, there was only $6 billion worth of investment. So already in a short space of time, we've seen a 5 times growth of investment. Agtech is not fintech. The fintech sector is worth hundreds of billions, and it's not healthcare tech, but it is growing very quickly. And I hope, at least in the next 5 years, that we will reach some of those bigger numbers. Much of it, again, driven by AI. So I'm here as the founder of Hummingbird. I'm here as an investor in the space. I founded another company called Beetle Labs, which is really to consolidate my own investments. And finally, I'm here as a partner of a venture capital fund in London that really is looking for the next generation of AI companies to invest in. So I'd like to touch on those themes today. I'd love to take some questions as we go along. And if anyone wants to find me, the best thing to do is to connect to me on LinkedIn. So I'm going to begin by talking a little bit in detail about Hummingbird Technologies, which is the company that I founded. And we hope we pioneered some of the artificial intelligence that you now see today. So what we do is quite simple. We use satellite data, remote sensing data, and we run that. And the name of the game is to try and measure regenerative agricultural practices from space. And none of what I describe is possible without artificial intelligence. You need so much data in real time that no human being could ever draw the boundary of every field, could measure the biomass of every plant, could measure the presence of cover cropping, could measure the soil health. And Hummingbird does that on a massive scale. And we do that for big businesses like Monsanto or Bayer or John Deere or Nestle or people like that who are trying to measure the sustainability in their own supply chains. And when we do things like that, what we're trying to do is to unlock an economic payment, either in the form of a carbon credit or to enable corporate insetting, or, dare I say, to replace European agricultural subsidies that we hope will become green subsidies, i.e. you're an Austrian farmer, you only get your subsidy if you say, yes, I'm looking after soil health. No, I'm not chopping down trees. Yes, I'm planting cover crops. Yes, I'm planting a diverse crop rotation. And we have many large customers like Rabobank who are working on their own carbon or green initiatives. And what we do for them is like a heartbeat audit of their entire land bank from space. Maybe I can pause there and just describe how artificial intelligence works, but the reality of it, not what you read in books. To give you an example, we developed something so simple called a field boundary detection algorithm. And in order to do this, by hand, we had to draw the boundaries of 10,000 fields in Australia, and then 10,000 fields in Canada, and then about 5,000 fields in the UK, and then 2,000 fields in France. And every time we moved countries, we had to modify the algorithm, and we had to draw everything by hand to train the code. And once we taught our own software to recognize the shape of a field boundary, we were able, in very, very, very quick time, to do this on a whole country scale. And the key with artificial intelligence is the automation of a manual task to an accuracy level that's higher than a human being could do. And we use that same technique for any of our algorithms. And you can take the best data scientists in the world, and you can take the best Python developers in the world, but if your data set is garbage, you're in big trouble. So when we do things like monitor the whole of the Midwest in the US in real time, we literally have to spend thousands and thousands of dollars per day sending agronomists into the field to verify whether our algorithms are correct or not. Because when you're doing this for customers in real time, you just don't have the opportunity to check. So training data, remote sensing, and AI at scale to get it working properly, it's all about the data. And then one other point, which is if I'm doing what I'm showing you now at scale, and you're receiving a €50 per acre subsidy, or you're receiving a €15 per hectare carbon credit, there's no good in Hummingbird doing it unless it costs $1 or $2. So the verification cost of a carbon program, and we work with our partners at Greener on this, has to be extremely low, because otherwise the farmer or the farming business doesn't receive the full economic benefit. And if you want to monitor the whole of Germany from space, or the whole of France, AI enables you to do it cheaply, at scale, in real time, and very accurately. So we've been talking about Hummingbird and some of the, what I call macro imagery analytics that we use with AI, but I'd also like to spend a few minutes talking about the micro analytics solution. Now, when we started 5 years ago, we had a vision that every farm would have robots, every farm would have drones. It kind of didn't happen. And what we now believe is that real-time, high-resolution data and automation is probably better suited for the fresh produce sector, i.e. high-value, high-margin crops, than it is for a wheat farmer in the UK or for a soybean farmer in the Midwest. And this is just basic unit economics. And where most of our customers are on high resolution, quite frankly, are in California, or in the Salinas Valley. And what we've developed over many years is almost the perfect AI solution for counting, sizing, grading every single plant in the field. What you're seeing right now has been patented. We give an ID to every single plant. we allocate that ID so that when we send imagery from the drone to the cloud to the Raven box in the sprayer, we can actually spray every single plant with a different dose of nitrogen, so that we even out the crop, so that the yield is uniform, and all of that feeds into a yield prediction or harvest weight prediction algorithm. And our customers here are not farmers. They are the very big food processors and fresh green processing businesses that lose millions and millions of euros per year if they overestimate or underestimate their harvest. And to give you an idea about data sets and AI and how do we build that algorithm, it's a publicly available research paper, but I think we labeled maybe 110,000 lettuce plants to get that working. And how do you label it? In the field with your hands and from the image, with a clipboard, literally. And AI is glamorous and sounds great, but the reality of it is, it's quite dirty to begin with, and it takes a lot of hard work, a lot of upfront investment, and then you need people that understand how to code to make it a reality. Just to give you an idea, we will fly thousands and thousands and thousands of acres every single day, all year, providing this analysis in real time, and the data gets sent from the drone to the cloud to the machine, and it's totally automated. There's no human contact. It helps farmers make decisions, or it helps agronomists make decisions, but it works in a totally autonomous loop. So that's a bit of background on Hummingbird, and that was the company that I founded 6 years ago, and now has 40 or 50 data scientists and engineers and product specialists working for us, and we're very much in scale up mode at the moment. So if anyone is growing fresh green vegetables, leafy greens, and would like to hear more about the fresh produce product, get in touch. If anyone is interested in regen ag and wants to verify practices, we're not a carbon trading platform, we're not a carbon modeler, but we do verify. So we'd be delighted to talk to anyone that's interested in that. And guys, also please fire away with questions, and I'll move on to some of what I'm doing outside of Hummingbird. So since leaving Hummingbird's executive function, where I remain the founder and president, but very much on the board and in an ownership position, I've actually returned to many of my buy-side activities. So a long time ago now, I used to run a hedge fund, and we were very early in clean tech investment, technology investment. It's how I got into Hummingbird. We were looking at robots and AI and drones and satellites, and really, like, in those days, there were very few people doing it. Now, of course, it's the thing to do. One of the things that I've been up to since then was attending COP26. Now, Hummingbird has always been a climate positive technology company, and we were very proud participants in the Tech for Our Planet award. And as part of that, I wrote a paper which I delivered alongside Vice President Al Gore, which discussed the role of artificial intelligence in the fight against climate change, and how do we use AI to get to net zero quicker. I just wanted to share with you a couple of things. So firstly, agriculture, forestry and land use are responsible for 18.4% of all global greenhouse gas emissions. Now, you all know that stat, but what you don't know is that derived emissions is even greater. And if we're going to solve climate change, we definitely have to address agriculture. And if we're going to do that, we need AI to do it. And there are some incredible companies now that are focused on these problems, and I'm seeing some amazing forestry carbon plays. I'm seeing some incredible indoor agriculture, aeroponics, hydroponics. And we're seeing AI really be adopted by the industry. People understand it now. They understand that what's holding it back. And I'm very excited about that. Just to give you some context, 3 days a week, I am a venture partner at Firstminute Capital. Firstminute is an early stage venture capital fund. We're based in London, but with offices in Berlin and a strong sort of US presence as well. And we like backing companies that are pre-seed or they're going into their seed. Now, we have, broadly speaking, $300 million under management, and AI is a massive area for us. I'm just gonna share with you a couple of slides, because this next one's important. So the secret sauce at Firstminute is that we're backed by 100 unicorn founders. So that means that all of our money comes from people that have built billion-dollar businesses and then have then exited those businesses and have given us their money to invest. And included in that mix are the founders or the CEOs from Google, from DeepMind, from Palantir, from Tencent, Onfido, Babylon Health, and Facebook. I have probably mentioned 5 of the best 10 AI companies in the world. And when we look at AgTech, we look at AI, and we can't separate the two. So if anyone who's listening today is raising money, and they're raising between $500,000 and $5 million, and they're getting going, please get in touch. Our portfolio is flying. We're a European fund, but we tend to co-invest with Sequoia, Benchmark, Andreessen Horowitz, and all the best. And we'd love to take a look. In terms of AgTech, I just want to spend the last few minutes maybe sharing some of my own investment themes for this year and the areas of focus, certainly for me, and what's underpinning some of our AI research. So the first is ag biotech. Now, many of you have heard of CRISPR, and many of you understand that in order to create crops that yield more, crops that can handle climate change, and the next generation of plants to feed the world, we cannot plant breed in the same way that we've been doing it for 300 years. So there are some amazing ag biotech opportunities on the horizon for those companies that are willing to innovate. I want to highlight 2 in this area. So some of you will heard of Pairwise. Pairwise is a really sophisticated AI driven business that adapts fruit and vegetables and does it through genome editing technologies. I also encourage you guys to have a look at Tropic Biosciences. They have something called the GEEGS platform, which is an RNA and gene editing business. And many of you will know this from the fight against the pandemic, but predictive modeling, sophisticated data science underpins a lot of this groundbreaking research. And if you want to breed a banana that does not get a certain disease, this is exactly the kind of approach that you need. Another area that we're really interested in is climate innovation. So we've talked a little bit about Hummingbird, how Hummingbird uses AI to measure the climate impact in farming. I'd encourage some of you to look at companies like Cervest, so CERVEST, who are using AI to model the climate outcomes in farming. If you're a farmer in sub-Saharan Africa, if you're a farmer in India, if you're a farmer in Australia or perhaps Brazil, desertification, climate change is gonna affect you in a very big way. And AI and data science is being used very, very efficiently to model that. We're looking quite heavily biomaterials and resources. There's a great company in New York that I encourage you to look at that are trying to biomanufacture an alternative to palm oil. And the idea is that if you can disrupt this $60 billion industry and alleviate land use change, you can quite literally create palm oil from microbes. And fermentation is that process. And AI and data science, again, underpins the biomanufacturing itself. I'd like quickly to reference novel farming systems. I think we've got a few minutes left, but if the organizers tell me when you want me to stop. Novel farming systems really captures advances in climate control, aeroponics, hydroponics, indoor farming, what we call vertical farming, but it also captures aquaculture. And I want to leave you with one phrase, which is controlled environment. If you're an AI specialist in any domain, what's very important is that you have a controlled environment. This is why AI is so hard in an open field, because you have so many variables you can't control. But indoors, right, going back to that video, you can control your environment, you can control your data set, and therefore you can automate your data set. So we're looking very closely at indoor farming. Without perhaps giving our house view, we believe that a lot of indoor farming is rubbish. So there's not really a technical innovation there. It's not really that climate friendly. We believe the real winners in that sector will be what we call the picks and shovel players. So people that are doing the computer vision within a greenhouse that will understand what plant disease looks like in a tomato plant, robotic bees, automated irrigation. It's the AI component of indoor farming that makes it great, not indoor farming itself. And we're spending a lot of time looking at that space, and we have, some pretty high hopes for it. There's a great business out of California called UNU, and they have an AI system. You see this camera on my screen that monitors the lighting and can help agronomists understand exactly what levels of water, nutrition, and other chemicals every single plant in the greenhouse needs. Just moving to the last few minutes, we're also, as I mentioned before, deeply interested in regen ag. I've probably mentioned that enough with Hummingbird, but I'd also like to talk about robotics. So there are literally hundreds of robotics businesses who are coming to the market and are having their own solutions. And one of my favorite businesses is called Climate Robotics. And what these guys do is they have a robotic system that goes into a field and uses AI to mulch up the residue from soy, corn, cotton, in an industrial crop, and then it converts it on site in an automated way into biochar, which, as we know, acts as a fertilizer. So not only do you get your carbon credit payment from Microsoft or Stripe for doing that, but you're also helping the farmer with probably a bigger problem, which is how to fertilize your field. I think Climate Robotics will be the first billion-dollar robotics business in ag tech. I encourage you to look at them. What I'd also like to touch on briefly is robotics and automation in livestock. So there's a company I sit on the board called Flocks, and what these guys are trying to do is look after chickens in an environmental way and improve welfare. So they have these sensors that can detect whether birds are clustering, whether there's low activity, whether there's disease, and how happy the birds are. So it's exactly this kind of analytics in a closed environment that can really move move the needle. And then finally, another area that we're looking at is, novel food, or innovative use of material. There's an amazing business called MycoWorks, which is a mycelium business, which comes from a plant, and they're using that to disrupt the animal leather market. So it's a biotechnology platform that uses mycelium to make a luxury material. Now, we can argue for days about meat versus veganism. I love meat, but I also like investing in non-meat. So if anyone's interested in synthetic protein or plant-based protein, I really encourage you have a look at an incredible business listed in London. It's called Agronomics. And Agronomics are basically trying to disrupt the cow and the fish. And they do that by investing in some of the best cellular agricultural businesses. This is a publicly available document. In my opinion, they have the best portfolio of synthetic protein companies in the world, and they use AI in almost all of them. And finally, I want to touch on agri-fintech. So I mentioned at the beginning that fintech is worth 150 billion as a sector. In my view, the most interesting market in the world for agri-fintech is India, where you have hundreds and hundreds of millions of farmers or people involved in agriculture, and they're trying to disrupt everything from the way farmers are paid, to the way they receive income from their harvest, the way they borrow and lease machinery. And we're seeing some incredible numbers. And there's an amazing VC fund called Omnivore, and they're based there. And anyone that wants to learn about agri-fintech and the power of AI to disrupt financial markets, I encourage they check them out. So that's kind of it from me in presentation terms. If we've got time, I'd be delighted to take any questions. If not, probably return to the organizers and follow your lead.
Yeah, Will, thanks a lot for the rundown. This is really lots of bandwidth you covered. It's incredible. We also received a couple of questions, but actually I would like to start with the first question, because what I was wondering in your presentation is, from an investor's perspective, do you think that AgriTech is rather will it bring local champions, like real estate, for example, with Silo, or like mobility did with lots of different companies? Or do you rather think it is going in the direction that you will have global companies for selected verticals, where the rollout ability is given?
I mean, it's a great question. So, okay, this is just my view. On the one hand, you've got massive global companies like CNH, John Deere, Cargill, that happily operate all over the world. And so in theory, an agtech company should also be able to do the same. But what we find in practice is that markets are very different. And what I would encourage people that are starting their own agtech business itself is to really focus on the vertical, to really focus on the problem. And instead of, look, Hummingbird, we made a few mistakes early where we probably expanded too early. And what you probably should do is focus on a fintech problem in India, or focus on a robotics problem in California, or focus on a grain trading problem in Russia, or a drought problem in Australia, and really dominate. And when you reach your critical mass, then you can expand. But I think, to answer your question, I think every single time we see a unicorn in the space, they get killed in the public markets, or they get hurt somewhere. So we haven't seen that pattern recognition of the next Palantir or the next Facebook in agriculture. We just haven't seen it yet. So we don't know, basically.
Yeah, but thanks for the insight. So my takeaway, it stays complicated, but don't get too wide in your ambitions, like focus. Yeah, we also received lots of questions from the audience. So perhaps we could pick up 2 or 3 also with regard to the time. So I would like to hand over to Pia to guide you through them.
Yes, sure. So I think the first one was still on the piece on Hummingbird Technologies, and the question is how applicable your MIV is, your solution for carbon practices on different soil types, and how you can prove that carbon has not left the soil.
So that's a brilliant question. So firstly, we've been doing this for a while, right? We were the first, or we were the equal first. And we understand just how difficult it is to get a model working on one soil type and then transferring it to another, or transferring it, for example, from the UK to the US. And the short answer there is that every time you go to a different soil type or a different geography, you actually have to retrain your model. So anyone that has something working in France, it's not going to work in Argentina unless they put that investment in. That would be my answer. Secondly, is that if you look at Verra or Gold or the USDA or Climate Solutions Fund in Australia or DEFRA in the UK, right? Most of these methodologies say that you should measure both the indirect and direct carbon sequestering activities. Hummingbird has chosen to focus on indirect activities, right? So planting cover crops, no-till, like cultivation that's less harmful, change of land use, what crop you plant. These are all empirical, algorithmic calculations that we can prove. And we know that they combined equal carbon positive outcome. But to be clear, if you want to trade a carbon credit on nori or indigo or agrina, you don't have to measure the carbon content of the soil. You have to prove that your indirect activities are helpful. In Australia, you do have to measure. So you actually take a soil sample in year 1, and then you measure MRV in years 2, 3, 4. So it kind of depends on the country and the methodology. But look, we're trying to do this like today. Over time, I think you're going to get direct carbon measurements. But anyone that says they can do it today is probably not telling the truth.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Perfect, thank you.
I see that.
Yep.
Yeah,
maybe just one comment from my side, because there are a couple of questions. If you could please reshare what you mentioned before, or so on. I think the easiest way would be that if, let's say, afterwards, once the talk is over, you just comment directly, put one LinkedIn comment under the live feed so that people can, are directed into the right information.
But the venture capital fund is called Omnivore, which is the one in India. That's in the chat group. The AI and Net Zero paper was published by Tech UK. The methodology, the most common one is Verra. So the USDA Comet Tool and Verra and Gold, those are the ones to look at. But the European Green Deal, it uses that. So just you kind of have to look at a few.
Okay. What do you say, Clemens? Do we have time for one more question?
Yeah, final famous last words, one more question.
Sure.
So I think the other top question we have is on the methodology that is used to align to verify the carbon credits.
Yeah, I mean, look, so as I mentioned, the Verra, but maybe just to address this Otto's point. So in my view, you can look at agriculture in 2 different ways. You can either say agriculture is responsible for X% of the world's carbon emissions, and isn't agriculture bad? I don't see the world like that. I see it as an opportunity, because responsible farming at scale can be carbon positive. So the whole point of food and agriculture is to try and turn it into a carbon positive sector by doing all of the things that I've mentioned. Whether you believe, the carbon footprint is 5%, 10%, 20%, or 50% doesn't really matter. It's something. So the whole point is, how do we harness technology to make it a measurable positive sector, so that food production actually contributes to climate change alleviation, not makes it worse, I think.
Okay, so that's great. Will, I have to say, I still have to think of your Hummingbird technology talk and the lettuces you have to count. Did that impact your decision in the supermarket when buying fresh produce? Do you look differently at lettuces now?
It's actually really annoying for anyone that I go shopping with, because you find yourself like standing in the lettuce aisle looking at the back of the packet to try and understand whether they're a customer or not. But by and large, they are. So
that's great. Great for you, at least. Yeah.
Guys,
okay.
Pleasure.
Yeah. Thanks a lot for tuning in. And yeah, if people have questions, we of course gladly forward them to Will. And yeah, people can always get in touch with you via LinkedIn. I think you also mentioned this during your keynote. So thanks a lot and have a nice day.
Guys.
Bye.